Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in the Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment, I shall be reviewing the Bayerische Flugzeugwerke 109 ML1, also known as the Messerschmitt 109 E-1. To provide you a brief historical overview of the ML variant of the 109 and the sub-variant depicted here in War Thunder, the ML variant of the 109 was introduced in 1938. As the successor to the highly successful D variant featuring subtypes D1 through to D3. The idea was to improve upon the highly unreliable Daimler-Benz 600A engine featured in the D variants and switch it out for what was to be a very unreliable Daimler-Benz 601 A1 engine. This engine was inline, providing 1000 horsepower. Despite the reliability issues, two prototypes were flown as of the summer of 1938. The prototypes were V14 and V15. With V14 featuring two 7.92mm MG17 machine guns above the engine, complemented with two 20mm MGFF cannons based in the wings, much like the 109 D3 type. V15 however was to lose the cannons and only have the two machine guns above the engine. Both planes performed very well in test flights, with pilots commenting that V14 was the better plane thanks to its comparable performance with V15 and its higher burst mass. Nonetheless, despite the success, the lack of availability of reliable Daimler-Benz 601 A1 engine types meant that the production of the first ML series plane, the ML1, was delayed until the very late stages of 1938, meaning that the ML1s were rolled out into combat service with the German Luftwaffe as of February-March 1939, allowing them to reach the very end stages of the Spanish Civil War, which concluded in 1939. The ML1 was to prove rather successful in terms of performance versus the Russian I-16s. However, at the same time, the lack of decent firepower, and indeed armour for the pilot, meant that the plane wasn't exactly the best performer in certain regards. This was to be reciprocated during the Phony War, also known as the very first couple of months of the Second World War on the Western Front, whereby the ML1 was matched up against French and British fighter types such as the P-36, which was on loan from America to the French, and indeed the Hawker Hurricane. It was found that once again the ML1 could outperform these planes, yet the lack of armament by comparison with earlier 109 types meant that it was a little bit difficult to always secure the kill. Still, thanks to the overall performance of the ML1, the plane was to see service right up to the end of 1939, whereby the plane was to see improvements in terms of armament and engine for the ML3 type, which was rolled off in the early stages of 1940. Therefore, the ML1 goes down in history as a very limited service fighter, which, thanks to its high performance in terms of manoeuvrability and power, was able to retain its place in history for a short but successful period of time. With that being said, how exactly does the ML1 handle in War Thunder? Well, as we go into this 1 versus 1 dogfight with the opposing ML1, we are going to see all of the wonderful traits the ML1 put into practice. Right here we can see we've got a brilliant rudder, and indeed very responsive elevators, which allow us to dodge the brunt of that ML1's fire. What's more, thanks to our highly powerful engine for a battle rating of 1.7, we are able to continue to climb and accelerate ferociously, allowing us to drop ourselves right behind the enemy 109 ML1. However, we then trade this in for a very weak armament. If we had one 20mm cannon, we may have killed that ML1 with that very short burst on the cockpit, or indeed the main fuselage, and this is reciprocated in further passes during this engagement where I am now taking the advantage. What's more, at the same time you have to be wary of the fact that this plane is not a turn fighter, and the turn circle, although not depicted here, is quite wide by comparison with fighter types such as the Ki-43, the Heinkel 112, the Spitfire Mark 1, the Hurricane Mark 1 and Mark 2, and indeed, perhaps even the Yak 1, although I've yet to test the newly featured Yak 1, but I'd assume from the Yak 1B that the turn circle is not comparable. As we go to dive and continue our dogfight with this ML1, we notice a friendly MiG-334 who is on the back of them, and it's at this point I decide to break off because I do not want to encroach on friendly territory and crash into my teammate. What's more, I've already won the dogfight, so why do I need to pursue this any further at high risk? Therefore I return to climbing and levelling out to build up speed, As we can see here, we have gone from 325 km an hour already to 370 km an hour in a very short space of time on the level, thanks to our brilliant performance in terms of the engine output. Still, with that all being said, let us go over the basics here. We are on the ground strike map, Port, and the setup I am using is as follows. Omni-purpose ammunition for the machine guns, and the reason for this is because the omni-purpose belt features a decent number of incendiary rounds plus a good combination of tracers, allowing me to get my shots onto target and hopefully set my opponents on fire. The tracer belt is made up entirely of APT, armour piercing tracer, which, whilst it's able to get through armour, does not have the ability to set targets on fire as easily as say the stealth or the omni-purpose belt. As you all know, I do prefer my tracers, hence the absence of the stealth belt. As we descend on this F1M2, we note that the roll rate of the E-1 is compromised at high speed, and we managed to achieve a very easy first kill thanks to the lack of armour on the F1M2. We then encroach on the back of a Hurricane Mark IIB, who seems to be more concerned with cutting through whatever's in front of it, and soon, instead of manoeuvring out the way of my fire, it decides to go for a friendly ground vehicle, at which point it crashes into the trees for our second kill, although I shall discount that for the purposes of this review. We then see a 109 ML1 heading straight underneath us, at which point we pepper it with a few rounds to achieve our first assist. As we climb away, thanks to our brilliant performance and energy retention as we cruised along the level, we can see that we're already back up to 5,000 metres, having only dropped to a speed of 380 km an hour. We therefore loop over thanks to our brilliant elevators and roll out thanks to our decent roll rate at speeds of 250 km an hour to 500. Above 500 km an hour you will find that your ailerons and indeed your roll rate therefore locks up horrendously, meaning that it's very difficult to achieve a succinct and successful boom and zoom pass. At the same time, keeping to more moderate to high speeds, not extremely high speeds, such as somewhere between 300 to 450 km an hour, will allow you to make the most of this feature. A roll rate which is only comparable to say that of the Yak-1 or the Spitfire Mark 1 at lower speeds. You will be outrolled by a Lag-3 and indeed a MiG-315 or MiG-334, yet you have a decent roll rate. What's more, as you can see here, I am once again abusing my elevator in order to build altitude, and then combining this with my engine to build up my speed in order to briefly engage a buffalo, achieving a glancing blow but not giving sufficient lead. I then notice a massive pool of enemy fighters over friendly ships, and I intend to once again employ a very powerful boom and zoom pass with my limited armament in order to try and glean some assists. I'm getting a little bit disturbed by the power of the flak here, yet nonetheless, I'm staying steady, level, and making sure to time things right, coming on the back of an I-16. As I do this, I look around, of course situational awareness at its finest, and I come onto the back of the I-16 here, missing my initial burst, but then achieving a couple of very light hits. I break away because I know I cannot turn fight with any of those planes, and indeed, turn fighting in amongst a huge proportion of enemy fighters is tantamount to suicide. An enemy Messerschmitt 109 tries to chase after me, although due to my speed on the level I'm able to get away and have put a few more shots into another 109 F1. I'm still able to break away at a speed of roughly 500 km an hour, which means I do not have to hesitate or worry about being chased around the map. As we can see, I'm able to break away and rinse and repeat the whole build up altitude and make a gentle boom and zoom pass, hoping to just glean some damage when and where appropriate. With that all being said, let us return to the setup. For gun convergence I'm using 300 meters, the reason being the high spread at long distance, especially when hunting bombers, something I will come onto shortly, and at close range this means I can put a lot of shots onto target, especially as you're going to see very shortly when I manage to get in close behind some enemy fighter types and take them down, thanks to the high fire rate and the power of the machine guns at convergence when you put a 1 to 2 second burst in. I am also using a 30-minute fuel load as per the usual, and as I go to dive down here, we're about to see the power of the ML1. I note an enemy Hurricane Mark II, so I cut my engine to come down on them a little bit more easily. I put a few more shots in, and despite the fact that I haven't done any significant damage, this has set me up for a very nice position. The Hurricane Mark II now has taken a significant portion of damage to their fuselage, and it means as I go to loop around once again, and come for another boom and zoom pass, I'm more and more prepared. Well, there's Type 24 Ishak tries to come after me, which point I can use my roll rate and rudder response to dodge out of the way. It's at this point that I go to work on a Hurricane Mark 2B to achieve my second kill. I then brake onto the back of this M3 to achieve kill number 3, and then go after this A5M4 to make it 4 kills. As we can see, in very powerful, succinct bursts, the M1 can be just as deadly as a cannon-based fighter. And here we're able to use the power of our engine once again in combination with WEP in order to break up and away from this I-16 Type 24 whose performance cannot match up to our own. We then come around to put a few shots in on them, achieving a critical hit and knocking out their tail control. And as we force them into the ground, we achieve our ace. Attempting to break away from the furball, our momentary lack of spatial awareness means that a lag-free is able to get a hit onto our main fuselage. It was most likely a 20mm FIT round, doing significant damage to our fuselage, but demonstrating that the M1 is quite a durable plane. We are saved by a friendly I-16, and if we had not been fortunate enough to have a friendly fighter on tow, we may have been able to outdrag the lag-free, simply because the performance of our engine is a little bit better than that of the lag-free in my experience. Nonetheless, as we break away and reflect on what was quite a tough situation, the game comes to its end and it's time to look at some post-game stats. Ergo, upon reflection we can see that our 6 kills, although I preferred to discredit this to 5, and our single assist netted us 15,964 silver lions. On top of this we earned 1,002 research points, with all of those research points going towards our work on the Focke-Wulf 190A4. We thereby conclude this review of the 109 ML1 by realising that at a battle rating of 1.7 it is nowhere near the ideal turn fighter, due to its reasonable but desperate roll rate at high speed and its wide turn circle. Instead, this plane makes for a deadly energy fighter, thanks to its powerful engine, giving it brilliant acceleration on the level both at low or high speed. Moreover, the high top speed, when combined with an impressive climb rate, and a rudder which allows it to change direction and snap out the way of incoming fire when and where appropriate, means that this plane is very difficult to catch on the level or indeed in the vertical, especially seeing as you have a very tight loop circle comparable almost to the P-36. The armament is lacking, however, as depicted in the gameplay here up against fighter opponents, it's not about the single burst to get the kill. Instead, you're going to have to make multiple passes, weakening your opponents with every burst of fire. And this can be extended to attacking level altitude bombers, such as the Heinkel 111 and the PBY. Multiple passes with shots placed onto target will allow you to bring very tough opponents down, as long as you keep your speed up and be wary of the fact that you do not want to be behind the turrets for a very long period of time, as the durability of this plane is not exactly the best, and what's more, the engine is quite exposed. If you want to beat an ML1, you have to force it into a low altitude turn fight and cause it to bleed off its speed. This plane performs very well in a speed range of 350 to 500 km an hour, and above 3,000 meters altitude I have found this plane comes to life by comparison with its performance at 1,500 meters altitude and lower. We can see by comparison to the rest of our team, we came first, not by a huge margin, but because we played to the strengths of what is a deadly plane when used in moderation, and when you pass through the furball continuously rather than trying to stay in the fight and take on a do or die attitude. Indeed, if you're looking for a plane which rewards the player who always gives it one last try, then the ML1 is the fighter for you. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. Yet until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!